Close your eyes. You are walking through a vast golden desert under a sky thick with ancient whispers. In the distance, stone pillars rise from the sand, silent, broken, but still watching. This is not the Egypt you've seen in books. This is the land of forgotten names. And buried beneath these sands is a queen who was never meant to be remembered. A woman who ruled as a king, a legacy carved in limestone and later erased by chisel and flame. Tonight, you will meet her, the forbidden pharaoh, Hatshepsut. The desert wind whispered through the cliffs of Deir el-Bahari. Stone columns stood silent, worn by time. The names were gone. Long ago, a pharaoh ruled here, but the stones that bore her name had been deliberately defaced. No ordinary woman is erased. There was a reason. There had to be a reason. As twilight settled on the Nile's edge, a lone traveler walked toward the ruins. In their hand, a single scrap of papyrus, on their face, quiet curiosity, and deep within the first, stirrings of something long forgotten. Hatshepsut's story did not begin here, but perhaps here it would be remembered. Before the chisel struck stone, for her name was hidden in silence. She was a child of Egypt's divine blood. Born to Pharaoh, Thutmose I, and his great royal wife, Hatshepsut was wrapped in linen and prophecy. From birth, she walked through marble halls painted with gold and guarded by the gods. She was called God's wife of Amun, sacred title no ordinary daughter received. Priests whispered she had Ra's favor. Some said the sun itself paused to greet her, while others played with dolls. Hatshepsut studied rituals, learned diplomacy, watched armies return from Nubia with gold, slaves, and glory. Her gaze was calm, not like a princess, but like someone waiting for destiny to arrive. She was never meant to be just a queen. When Pharaoh Thutmose I died, the palace grew cold. The mourning drums echoed through Thebes. But behind the veils of grief, there was confusion. His heir, Thutmose II, was Hatshepsut's half-brother, a child of a lesser wife. To keep power within reach, Hatshepsut was wed to him, queen and sister. But the gods had other plans. Thutmose II's reign was brief. He was frail, uncertain, and soon, silent on the throne, sat a boy, Thutmose III, just a toddler. But a child cannot rule an empire, not one built on war, temples, and blood. So someone had to hold the throne, not steal it, just protect it. Until he was old enough that someone was Hatshepsut. Regent, guardian, shadow pharaoh, or so it began. At first, she ruled from the shadows. She stood behind the boy king, guiding his hand, signing his decrees, whispering through the throne. But Egypt needed more than whispers. The Nile had risen early that year, a good omen. The temples buzzed with prophecy. The priests waited. And then she stepped forward. Hatshepsut declared herself pharaoh, not queen regent, not mother of the king. Pharaoh? She wore the ceremonial beard. She took the male titles. She ordered. Statues carved not of a woman, but of a god-king. And Egypt accepted her, not with rebellion, but with reverence. She did not take the throne. She became it. Under Hatshepsut's rule, Egypt did not crumble. It bloomed. There were no great wars. There was greatness. She restored temples that had crumbled under past kings. She commissioned obelisks that pierced the sky like frozen sunlight. And she reopened trade routes, long forgotten by sword and sand. Ships were sent to Punt, a land of incense, gold, and wonder. They returned with riches, exotic trees, baboons, myrrh, things never seen in Thebes before. The people cheered. Priests praised. Even the gods seemed content, and Hatshepsut, in her palace of red granite and cool shadows, sat on her throne with calm eyes and steady hands. She was no usurper. She was pharaoh. Not everyone celebrated her reign. In the courtyard, servants bowed. In the temples, priests burned incense. But in the stone corridors behind the throne, there were whispers. They spoke not of her greatness, but of her gender. She wears the crown, okay, but she is not a man. She builds temples, but leaves no sons. Will she return the throne, or keep it forever? And in the shadows, Thutmose III was growing, no longer a child, no longer quiet. He trained with generals. He watched the court, counted. The years he said nothing. But the stone remembered every cartouche carved, every statue raised, every god she invoked. He saw them not as tribute, but as challenge. At the foot of Thebes, Hatshepsut began her greatest project, a temple not for war, not for conquest, but for memory. Djese Argeseru, the Holy of Holies, carved into the cliffs of Dr el-Bahri, its symmetry flowed with the mountain. Its columns danced with the light of Ra. Its walls told stories of gods, of journeys, of a queen who ruled like a king. No pharaoh, man or woman, had ever built such beauty. Visitors stood in awe. Pilgrims wept. Priests whispered that even the gods must now look down in envy, but in a chamber deeper than sunlight. Someone else stood in silence, watching, waiting for memory. It's a threat to those who wait for power. Time passed, and even the sun grew tired. Hatshepsut had ruled Egypt for over 2 decades. The people still praised her. The temples still sang her name, but something had changed. Her closest advisor, Sinemut, the man who had guided her every step, vanished without a word. His statues were smashed. His tomb was sealed, unfinished, unmarked. In court, voices grew quieter. Thutmose III, now a man of war, marched with his generals. They returned victorious, and the people whispered again. Hatshepsut watched, but said nothing. She had built monuments. She had brought peace. She had ruled as pharaoh. But now, she stood alone, and deep within the temple's heart, a crack formed, small at first, but it would soon split her memory in 2. And then she was gone. No great funeral, no golden mask, no monument of death. One day, she ruled. The next, she vanished. Her name was spoken less. Her images were left to gather dust. But it would not stop there. Years later, a command was whispered. Into stone halls. Her statues were dragged down. Her face was chipped away. Her name was erased from cartouches one by one by one. Temples that once honored her now bore empty spaces where her story once lived. Egypt did not bury her, tried to unmake her. But stone remembers, even when voices forget. Centuries passed, new pharaohs ruled, new gods were praised, new wars were fought, and Hatshepsut became a rumor. In scrolls she was missing, in tombs she was absent, so only silence wore her crown. But not all voices fade in the ruins of Djese. Faded images remained. A single hand gesture here, faint cartouche missed by the chisel, face too deep to erase. Archaeologists would one day kneel in that dust, brush away time and ask, who was she? Not just a queen, not just a regent, but a king in every way but name. And somewhere beneath the stone, beneath the silence, she waited to be remembered. It was the 19th century, long after her temples had crumbled, after her name had been swallowed by time. The winds of Thebes shifted once more. Explorers, scholars, grave robbers turned archaeologists. They came seeking treasure, but found only questions in Dr el-Bahri. Beneath layers of rock and sand, they uncovered a temple, one unlike any they'd seen, carved deep into the cliffside. Elegant, balanced, divine. Whose was it? They searched for a king. But everywhere, they found the trace of a woman, a name here and there, scratched out, then resurfaced. A title, Pharaoh, a body, buried not in gold, but in silence. And slowly, they spoke her name again. Hatshepsut. At first, they couldn't believe it. A woman. No, it must be a regent, a queen, a co-ruler. But the walls told another story. They saw her in the ceremonial beard. They saw her in the throne name of Motker. They saw her commanding armies, offering to gods. sailing divine barges like any pharaoh before her. The archaeologists pieced together what the ancients had tried to erase, and what Thutmose III had buried in silence. She had ruled alone, as pharaoh. For over 2 decades, no chaos, no rebellion, only prosperity. And so, in journals and textbooks, museums and documentaries, they began to write her name again. Hatshepsut. S-U-T. Not as wife, not as mother, not as sister, but as pharaoh. At the edge of the cliffs in Deir el-Bahari, beneath a sky veiled in desert mist, a temple whispers across time. It is not grand by accident, it is not silent by choice. This temple was her voice etched in limestone, lifted in columns, painted in ochres and reds, telling the story of a woman who defied the throne's expectations. Visitors tread softly here. They don't always know why. Maybe it's the perfect symmetry, or the way the desert falls away behind it like an ocean of forgotten time. But the truth, it's because this place remembers her, not as legend, not as myth, but as pharaoh, still standing, still sacred, and still speaking. They said no woman could become a god. She declared, in temple walls and sacred scrolls. She reimagined her story, not born of mortal womb, but of Ammon himself, a divine conception, a celestial lineage, not queen, not regent, but daughter of the god, crafted by his hand, whispered into the world on lotus petals. She built obelisks to pierce the skies. She carved divine tales into stone, casting herself among the eternal. And for a time, the priests accepted. The people obeyed. Egypt thrived. But gods walk a dangerous line, and their light casts long shadows. And mortal men do not forget who once stood in their place. For when her voice faded, others rose. To silence it, when Hatshepsut died, her temples whispered. But her name was no longer safe. Thutmose III, grown into power, did not strike with sword or fire, he wielded silence. Chisels scraped her face from stone. Carvings vanished, statues shattered, her image a threat. Her legacy, a wound to patriarchal pride. Scrolls were rewritten, columns reinscribed, as if she had never ruled, never built, never breathed. But stone remembers in broken fragments. Her story survived. Hidden beneath sand, waiting, centuries passed, until her face returned in a dusty tomb in a scholar's dream. In the hands of time, the queen who became a god was never truly erased, not forgotten, just sleeping, now awakened. Now told,